What's up, people? The Overwatch League starts up again in just a few days. Last season, we saw some teams running the show, some fighting to stay in it, and some barely hanging on. This season will most likely be similar, but we've got 8 brand new teams joining the fray. How will the expansion rosters stack up against the veteran players? And how have the original teams changed during the offseason? These are my official predictions for the Overwatch League Season 2. Before we get into it, I want to be clear that this is just my predictions, not necessarily ranking the teams from worst to best. I may predict Team A will do better than Team B, even if Team B looks better on paper. I'll do my best to explain my reasoning, but sometimes I just have a gut feeling about certain teams. Also, obviously all the players on every team are absolutely incredible, the best of the best in Overwatch. So even if I trash talk the bottom tier teams, I'm not saying they're objectively bad, just not quite as good as the others. Drop a like if you're excited, comment with who you think will come out on top, and now with all that out of the way, let's jump into this. Like most power rankings I've seen, in dead last we have the Chengdu Hunters. I see them following in the footsteps of the Shanghai Dragons from last season. Maybe not quite as bad, like they might get a couple wins, but based on historical context, I don't think this full Chinese roster will be able to compete with the best. I hope I'm wrong. I want to see these guys do well, but my gut says probably not. Next to last is a team that shocked the world with an incredible run last season, the Boston Uprising. They're used to being the underdogs, and this season is no different than the last. I have them so low because they got rid of their 2 best players in my opinion, and that's Striker and Nako. Not to mention they lost their coach Krusty as well, who put together that 10-0 run during Stage 3. Their only saving grace is their tank line of Gamsu and Note. The rest of the team is questionable at best. As I've mentioned before, I am from Massachusetts. I want to see the Boston Uprising win, but I'm not getting my hopes up this time. At number 18, we have a team that promised to never go full Korean, the Florida Mayhem. And guess what, guys? They're full Korean! No, TheFatRat driving a bus full of Korean players to practice every day does not make this multicultural. I'm sorry. We all know TheFatRat isn't getting any playtime, and if he does, they'll probably lose because I doubt he knows much Korean. And you know who else doesn't speak Korean? Anyone on the Mayhem's coaching staff. You try playing in the Overwatch League with coaches that don't speak the same language as you. You'll be lucky to place 18th. The players they've picked up are actually pretty good, it's just unfortunate they've been put in this awful situation. Rounding out the bottom 4 is the team with everyone's favorite logo, the Washington Justice. Speaking of logos, funnily enough, my bottom 4 predicted teams are the same as my bottom 4 team logos. Check out that video if you haven't already, link in the description. Anyway, the Justice do have some decent pieces, specifically Janice and Wizard Young from Season 1's NYXL. So they definitely have the potential to end up higher than 17th. But this is a mixed roster and the players don't have much experience playing with each other, so I'm thinking it will take them a while to get their footing and it probably won't happen this season. From here on out, it got really hard to compare teams because we don't know how a lot of these players will perform in the Overwatch League. Between places 16 and 9 is kind of a toss-up really, but I went with my gut and predicted where they would all end up by the end of the season. So at number 16, we have the Guangzhou Charge. This team is largely comprised of players from the Korean contenders team Metabellum, with a few pieces from other teams including some native English speakers. They should have the synergy to beat the less consistent teams like Boston and Washington, but what they lack is superstar power. None of the players on the team stand out as the all-star of the group, which could be a problem when they need someone to clutch out an overtime victory. They also only have 2 tank players signed and 2 players are under 18. Guangzhou is going to be a team with a slow start that's looking to make some big moves in the mid-season signing window. As much as I want to have faith in these guys, I place the Houston Outlaws at number 15. They picked up Dante in the offseason, the Tracer player they've desperately needed. However, it's most likely too little too late for Houston. They needed a good Tracer last season. Now, in the GOATS meta, Tracer isn't nearly as relevant. And a lot of their players are really good, but not quite as good as the rest of the league. It's kind of hit or miss with the Outlaws. They could pop off and be near the top of the rankings like the beginning of last season, or they could fall off and be near the bottom like the end of last season. Based on how the other teams are looking, I predict the latter. At number 14, we have the team that everyone's got their eyes on to start this season, the Atlanta Reign. In case you've been living under a rock, the incredible popular streamer and master hit scan tracker DEFIANT was picked up by this team. and we're all waiting to see if he pops off or flops off. I actually think DEFIANT is going to do really well in the league. I'm definitely rooting for him. He's the reason they made it to number 14. They have some other great pieces as well, specifically their tank line of Dako and Pokpo. If the team can back these guys up, they could easily make the playoffs in my opinion. Not sure if this will be a controversial pick, but I've got the LA Valiant at number 13. Not much has changed with these guys during the offseason. They still have their great players like Agilities, Fate, Space, and Custa. But they lost their star DPS player in Soon to the Paris Eternal. And because of that, they had to transition Kariv to full-time DPS, leaving their support line pretty lacking. I think Bunny and Kariv can kind of make up for the loss of Soon, but I don't see them being quite as good. With a lot of the other teams making big moves, I don't think the Valiant did enough to make the playoffs. Their incredible color scheme couldn't quite carry them into the top 10, and I'm of course talking about the Hangzhou Spark. They do have some players that I'm super excited to see play like IDK, Gushui, and Crystal, but the rest of their team is largely unproven. You can compare these guys to the Guangzhou squad as they've got some Korean and some Chinese players on their roster. The difference I think is that star power I mentioned Guangzhou was lacking. Gushui is a tank player that I think could rival Fisher given the right team to back him up. And IDK and Crystal fill the support and DPS roles well to do exactly that. It's just going to come down to the other 3 starters, whoever they decide to play. Just short of the top 10 we have the Paris Eternal. I am incredibly excited to see the DPS duo of Soon and Shadowburn, assuming that's who they start. They should, because if they do, I think their DPS could rival that of the Philadelphia Fusion. Then we have players like Ben Best on tank and Cruz on support that could easily bring this team to the playoffs. And I love that these guys are all European. It's not only a great look for them, but also provides some excellent synergy that I think a lot of the new teams are lacking going into the season. I can see this team making a good run into the postseason if they play their cards right. With the biggest turnaround of all the Season 1 teams, the Shanghai Dragons made my top 10. This team basically went full Korean with only one Chinese player left in Dia. The DPS line of this team looks really powerful with players like Dia, DM, and Youngjin. Fearless and Geguri will finally get to shine in their tank roles. My only concern here is the support lineup. With only 2 of them, they'll have no backups, but I think they'll be alright. Both Luffy and Koma are great players, and as long as they keep their team healed, the Dragons should finally pull off their first win. Number 9 is a team I'm really excited to see play, and that's the Toronto Defiant. The reason this team is so exciting is that it brings together all the outcasts from the pro Overwatch scene. On top of all the promising new pickups, Toronto got Neko from the Boston Uprising, Asher from the Gladiators, and Envy who previously played for the Valiant in Season 1. All 3 of these players were incredible on their roles and honestly underappreciated on the previous teams, so I'm looking forward to seeing them shine with this new team. I see them having a season similar to the Uprising last season, a group of hidden gems coming together to make great things happen. Getting into the top 8, it became extremely difficult to sort out which teams were the best. Any of the remaining teams could end up at the top of the standings by the end of the season in my opinion. That being said, I had to come up with some kind of ordering. So at number 8 we have the Dallas Fuel. It's scary putting faith in these guys given what happened last season, but I think their off-season pickups will push them over the edge and into the playoffs. They got a huge buff to their support line in Closer and finally picked up a hopeful tank player in RCK. But I think it all comes down to how flexible Zachary can be on this roster. It seems as though they're putting all their chips in his ability to play flex DPS, and I have a feeling he's going to pull it off. With all-star potential at every position, there's no reason Dallas shouldn't be a finals contender, assuming we don't see any more mental breakdowns. Next up at number 7 is the Seoul Dynasty. After a disappointing first season, Seoul made all the right roster adjustments in preparation for this next one. The biggest acquisition was of course Fisher from the LA Gladiators. Known by the community as the most aggressive main tank around, Fisher plans to lead the Dynasty on a rampage through the ranks of the league. And their other new players like Michelle and Jesse from Korean contenders are perfectly capable of backing him up. It's exactly what they needed after the fall of Miro over the course of last season, sending the team into a frenzy looking for someone to play the main tank role. If all goes well, we should finally see a playoff appearance from this powerhouse Korean squad. Up next at number 6 is a team that everyone has been hyping up this offseason, and that's the San Francisco Shock. The hype is more than justified because these guys made some absolutely incredible pickups that they desperately needed. I believe this is the only 12-man roster left in the entire league, which has been seen as both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, they were able to make these awesome additions with the likes of Rascal, a hyperflex DPS player who previously played on Dallas Fuel and London Spitfire, Violet, a super talented support player from O2 Ardian, and most importantly, Striker and Krusty from the Boston Uprising. Striker's carry potential on Tracer is frankly terrifying, and Krusty was the mastermind behind Boston's 10-0 stage last season, as I mentioned earlier. All of this combined with the Shock's already solid roster makes for an intimidating opponent for any Overwatch League team. But on the flip side, as we saw with some teams in Season 1, having 12 players on your team and trying to give them all playtime can be a huge detriment in terms of building chemistry between your best members. I think the Shock may just have too much talent for their own good. I want this next team to win it all by virtue of their incredible story and also their super awesome branding, but realistically I had to predict that the Vancouver Titans would end up at number 5. If you don't know, the majority of this roster comes from the contenders team RunAway, a team with a history unlike any other in Overwatch. I'll link a good summary of their story down in the description if you want to check that out, but let's stay on topic here. These guys are the top ranked expansion team for a reason. Every piece of the puzzle is brimming with potential here. With master supports like Twilight and Repel, ferocious tanks like Bumper and Janu, and DPS gods like Hacksaw and Stitch, this team is a force that the Overwatch League is not prepared for. The literal only thing holding these guys back is that they haven't performed on the big stage yet, against the top tier Overwatch League teams. It could very well be no problem at all for them, but until I see them face off against the top 4, my gut tells me to leave them here at 5. Coming in at number 4 is the runner-up from last season, the Philadelphia Fusion. With barely any changes since the end of the finals, the Fusion are still looking as strong as ever. Carpe and EQO, in my opinion, are the strongest DPS duo in the league. Pair that with Philadelphia's stellar support lineup, the aggressive main tanks of Fraggy and Sato, and of course Bomb Master Poco himself, and you have a hyper aggro comp that most teams just can't withstand. There's no doubt in my mind that Philly will come out swinging and take down the majority of the opposition. But, in the end, I believe they'll once again fall short of total victory. And how fitting that the number 3 slot go to the team that defeated number 4 in the grand finals last season, the London Spitfire. They made a few roster changes, but for the most part their first place starting roster remains as it was. Prophet and Birdring on DPS, Gesture and Fury on tanks, Nuss and Bedosin on support. These guys all know how to flip the switch and come in clutch when the team needs it, as evidenced by their roller coaster season last year. Just when you think they're out, they swoop right back in up to the top. But this slight inconsistency may prove to be their downfall, as losing just a few games can make the difference between winning the finals and not making it in at all. My prediction, the Spitfire won't make it this time around. And now we're down to just 2 teams, the New York Excelsior and the LA Gladiators. I'll make a case for both and then reveal who came out on top. First, let's talk about NYXL. I really don't need to say much about these guys. If you watched Overwatch League Season 1, you know this was by far the most dominant and consistent squad in the running. Every single position has a powerhouse behind it. They've got arguably the best Tracer in the league in Sabiobi, hitscan boss Pine, projectile god Libero, the prodigy Flower, formidable tank duo Meko and Mono, unkillable main support Arc, and of course the Season 1 MVP Jonak on flex support. This team could take wins off the lower ranked teams through sheer intimidation alone. I expect nothing has changed since the Season 1 playoffs, and these guys won't be going down easily. And now the Gladiators. Everybody has these guys high, but I'm not sure a lot of people have them in the top 2. I just have this powerful gut feeling that the Gladiators are going to have an absolutely incredible season. Their new pickups in Decay and Roar are huge assets that play a huge role in my sentiment here. They picked up exactly what they needed in my opinion, with the rest of the roster already top tier. Big Goose and Shaz are arguably the best support duo in the league, Hydration can flex with the best of them, Surefour has quickly become one of the best hitscan players around, and Bishu is the glue that holds them all together. I can't help but think these amazing players are destined for victory this season. So, with all that being said, which one do I predict will win Season 2? Well, after going back and forth many times, my gut is telling me that this season is going to the New York Excelsior. As much as I want to say the Gladiators will take the championship, I think NYXL will get the better of them in the end. And trust me, I hate saying that New York is going to win, but I honestly just can't say otherwise. Their players are so overpowered on their own, and combine that with the synergy they've built playing together, I don't think anyone can stop them. I predict that this will be the season that New York takes home the gold. And that's it for my predictions. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. If you enjoyed the video, then please drop a like, it really does help me out, and subscribe to become a member of the Tang Gang. Also, let me know in the comments how you found this video. As a growing channel, it would be super helpful to know how new viewers are catching wind of my content. You can follow me on Twitter @TangyNacho, where I'll be posting about the Overwatch League as well as daily discussion tweets and updates about the channel. Check out some of my other videos if you haven't already, share them with your friends, and until we meet again, later people!